Welcome to Cheater Fallout. Let us get started with today's story. 3 weeks before our wedding, the woman I was about to marry asked me for one last night with her ex. Not a phone call, not a coffee, a night. And when she said it, sitting across from me with her hands folded like she was requesting a day off work, I smiled. I said yes. What she didn't know was that in the 11 seconds it took her to ask, she had just handed me the exit I'd been quietly looking for without ever admitting it to myself. My name is Daniel, and I want to tell you exactly how a man who never raised his voice erased himself from a woman's life so completely that a year later she still talks about it like a disappearance no detective could solve. I met Claire 3 years ago at a mutual friend's engagement dinner. She was the kind of person a room rearranges itself around. Funny, quick, warm in a way that felt like being let in on a secret. I fell fast. Too fast. Maybe. We moved in after 10 months, into a 2-bedroom on the 4th floor, with a view of nothing, but I loved it because she was in it. I signed the lease. I paid the deposit. My name on every line. Because I was the stable one. The careful one. The one who read the fine print while she laughed at me for it. When I proposed, she cried the good kind of crying, and I thought that was the whole story right there. We booked the venue for late September. A vineyard an hour out of the city that she'd dreamed about since before she met me. I put down $8,000. My parents chipped in for the catering. We picked the band, tasted 3 cakes, argued playfully about the guest list. She had her dress 6 months early. I wasn't nervous, I was sure. Or I told myself I was. Then, about a month before the date, the air in the apartment changed. Small things. Her phone lived face down now. She started taking calls in the stairwell. She'd go quiet mid-sentence and stare at the wall, like she was doing math she didn't want the answer to. I told myself it was cold feet, wedding nerves, the pressure of 2 families about to collide. People get strange before big days. I know that now for the lie it was. The lie I told myself, because the truth was standing in the room and I wasn't ready to look at it. Then came the night on the couch. She turned off the television in the middle of a show and turned to face me, folding one leg under her, and she said, "Daniel, there's something I need to ask you, and I need you to just listen before you react." Something in my chest went very still, not fear. Alert. Like a smoke alarm 1 second before the beep. I said, "Okay." She took a breath she'd clearly practiced. "It's about Marcus," she said. "Her ex." I said nothing. I just watched her mouth make the next sentence. "I need one night with him. Just one. To be sure. To close the door properly so I can walk into our marriage without wondering." The words hung there. I let them hang. "Say that again," I said, and she did, almost word for word, which told me everything. She hadn't blurted it. She had rehearsed it. This wasn't a confession. It was a proposal. "You want to sleep with your ex," I said. 3 weeks before you marry me. And you're asking me to sign off on it." She flinched at the word sleep but didn't deny it. "It's not about that," she said. "It's about closure. I haven't seen Marcus in over a year. I thought I was past it, but lately I keep wondering what if I never really finished it, and I don't want to carry that question down the aisle. I love you enough to be honest, instead of sneaking around." That's the part she was proud of, the honesty. She actually said, "I'm doing the brave thing here," and she believed it. I leaned back and looked at the ceiling for a moment. And here is where most men would have exploded, and I understand why. But I have a habit. When something matters, I go quiet. And in the quiet, I think. And in that quiet, a very cold, very clear thought arrived. If she needed a final night with him to be sure of me, then she was already gone. There was nothing to fight for. You don't beg someone to stay when they've told you they're testing whether they want to leave. So I did the thing that would haunt her the most. I said, "Okay." Her eyes went wide. "Really? You mean it?" I nodded once. "If you need to be sure, be sure." She exhaled like a woman set free, crossed the couch, kissed my cheek, told me I was the most understanding man she'd ever known. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not making this ugly." I held her and stared past her shoulder at the wall she'd been staring at for a month. And I understood it now. She wasn't doing math. She was rehearsing a goodbye she thought I'd survive. That was the last night we were ever a couple, though only one of us knew it. The next morning she slept in, peaceful. The sleep of a person who thinks they've gotten away with something clean. I got up early. I made coffee. And I made a decision that felt less like anger and more like waking up. But I'm a careful man. Remember, and before I did anything, I needed to know one thing. I needed to know whether one night was actually the first night, or whether it was just the first honest one. We'd shared a cloud account since the second year. Photos, backups, the boring plumbing of a shared life. She'd never bothered to separate hers. So while she slept, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold and I scrolled. It didn't take long. Screenshots she'd saved and forgotten to hide. A hotel confirmation from 4 months ago. A city neither of us had any reason to be in. One king room. Her card. Photos with the timestamps still attached. Messages backed up in plain text. Hundreds of them, going back most of a year. Marcus telling her he missed her. Her telling him she'd handle me. That I was easy. That I trusted her completely. And that made it simple. One line I will never forget. She wrote, "He'd never suspect anything. He's too busy planning the wedding." I read that line 3 times. He's too busy planning the wedding. Our wedding. The one I'd put $8,000 into. The one my mother was handwriting place cards for. I want to tell you that reading it broke my heart. But it didn't. And that scared me more than the messages did. Because it meant some part of me had already left this apartment weeks ago and was just waiting for the rest of me to catch up. I kept scrolling. There was a photo of the two of them at a rooftop bar. Her head on his shoulder, taken on a Tuesday. I distinctly remembered her telling me she was working late. There was a voice note I didn't play, because I didn't need to hear her voice sound like that for someone who wasn't me to know exactly what it would sound like. And there was the worst one, a message from just 11 days ago, where Marcus asked her if she was really going to go through with marrying me, and she replied, "I have to. The deposits are already down, and my family would kill me, but you and I both know what this is. You and I both know what this is." So, there it was. The one last night wasn't closure. It was a permission slip she was trying to get signed after the fact. A way to launder something she'd been doing for months into something that sounded like maturity. She wasn't asking me to let her say goodbye to her past. She was asking me to pretend her present was over. I closed the laptop. I didn't wake her. I didn't scream. Screaming was what she'd braced for. Screaming she could have used, could have posted about, could have turned into a story where I was the unstable one. I gave her nothing to use. Instead, I finished my coffee, washed the cup, put it back exactly where it belonged, and I started a list. Everything in my name. The lease, the utilities, the venue deposit, the joint account I had funded and she had spent from, the rental car I'd booked for the honeymoon, the moving company scheduled for the week after the wedding, back when I thought we were building something. One by one, over the next 2 days, while she went to work believing everything was fine, I began quietly pulling the threads. I called the landlord and gave notice, explaining a change in circumstances. My name, my lease, my right. He didn't ask questions. Men who own buildings have heard every version of this story. I called the venue coordinator, the same cheerful woman who'd walked us through the tasting menu, and I told her the September date was off. She started to offer me a later slot, a spring discount, and I stopped her. "There won't be a later date," I said. The $8,000 was mostly non-refundable this close, and I told her to keep it. Cancel the booking. Take my name off everything. Cheaper than a wedding. Cheaper than a divorce. Cheaper than a lifetime of wondering which of our anniversaries she'd be spending in a hotel room in a city with no reason to exist. I called the honeymoon airline and canceled 2 seats. I called the moving company and rebooked the truck. Same date. 1 address instead of 2. Mine going out instead of ours coming together. Every call was a thread, and every thread I cut made me stand a little straighter. And by the end of it, I realized I wasn't grieving. You don't grieve a house you've already walked out of. You just turn off the lights on your way through. I moved the money I'd earned back where it came from. I didn't take a cent that was hers. I'm not a thief. I was just removing myself, thread by thread. And with every call I felt lighter, like a man setting down a bag he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of his body. Then Friday came, the night she'd chosen. She packed a small overnight bag. She hugged me at the door for a long time, and she actually said, "You handling this so well means everything to me." I said, "I just want you to be sure." She smiled, kissed me, told me she'd call when she was heading back tomorrow, and she walked out to her car. I stood in the doorway and watched her taillights turn the corner, And the second they vanished, so did I. I had a van waiting 2 streets over. 3 friends who didn't ask questions. In 4 hours, my half of the apartment became a memory. Every piece of me. Clothes. Books. The watch my grandfather left me. The documents from the safe under the bed. My passport. Gone. I left her things untouched, folded, exactly where they were. I wasn't punishing her belongings. I was subtracting myself. By midnight, the place looked like a woman lived there alone, because now one did. On the kitchen counter, I left a single envelope. Inside, one line. You asked for one last night with him. I've decided not to give you the rest of my life to go with it. I didn't sign it with love. I just signed it, Daniel. Then I locked the door, dropped my key through the mail slot, and drove to a city 300 miles away, where I'd quietly signed a short lease that afternoon. By the time Claire was lying next to Marcus, I was already gone, and I never once checked my phone to wonder how her night was going. I had no interest in the results of an experiment I'd already refused to be part of. She came home Saturday around 8. I know the exact time because the doorbell camera, still mine, still on my account, sent me the notification. And I watched it later, once. The way you watch a storm from a window you're safe behind. She walks in smiling, proud, the overnight bag on her shoulder, like a trophy. She calls my name. Once. Then again, louder. She walks toward the bedroom and stops. The closet doors are open, her side full. My side, a row of empty hangers. Drawers half out. The desk, bare. You can see the exact second the smile leaves her face. She spins, calls my name a third time, almost a shout now. And then she sees the counter. She sees the envelope. She reads it, and she sits down on the floor right there in the kitchen, and she doesn't move for a very long time. I told myself I'd feel triumphant watching it. I didn't. I felt done. That's a better feeling than triumph. Triumph fades. Done stays. What happened over the next weeks, I heard about in pieces, mostly much later. She called me 40 times the first night. Straight to voicemail, then blocked. She texted paragraphs. Blocked. She drove to my parents' house Sunday morning, and my father, who was a kinder man than me, opened the door and told her calmly that I was safe, that I was gone, and that there was nothing here for her, and then he closed it gently in her face. She went to my office. I'd already resigned. She messaged mutual friends who slowly, one by one, stopped answering, because the thing about disappearing cleanly is it forces everyone to pick a side, and silence has a way of telling people which side is which. And here is the part she never saw coming, the part that turned a clean exit into something closer to justice. Though I take no credit for it because I didn't lift a finger. Marcus, the ex, the one great unfinished question of her life, ghosted her within the week. Because Marcus, it turned out, wasn't waiting for her. Marcus was married. She'd been the secret, not the future. Her one last night wasn't a door closing on her past. It was her walking, willingly, into the exact same trap she was trying to spring on me, except she was the one who got left holding it. She'd blown up a marriage that hadn't happened yet to chase a man who was already someone else's problem. And when it fell apart, when Marcus stopped answering and I had vanished, and the apartment lease she couldn't afford alone came due, she had nothing to walk back to. No fiancé, no vineyard, no him. Just an empty 2-bedroom with her name suddenly on none of it. She posted, of course, a long, soft, wounded thing about how the man she loved abandoned her without warning, how love should include forgiveness, how people can be so cruel. Some strangers agreed, but others didn't, and one reply she couldn't delete fast enough said what everyone was thinking. It said, "He didn't abandon you. You asked to leave and he simply held the door." That comment got more likes than her post. I never wrote a word online. I never corrected anyone. I never told a single person about the hotel receipt or the messages or the line about how easy I was. I let the silence carry it. Because silence, done right, is not weakness. Silence is the loudest verdict there is. Almost a year later, I ran into Naomi, Claire's closest friend, at a work conference in another city. Bad wine, sticky name tags, the usual. She saw me across the room and froze like she'd seen a ghost, which I suppose she had. She came over. We talked carefully, the way you talk around a landmine. Then she said it. Claire's still not okay, Daniel. She's in therapy. She says leaving was the worst mistake of her life. She thought you'd fight for her. She thought you'd yell and then forgive her and marry her anyway. I took a slow sip of water. She didn't ask me for a fight, I said. She asked me for permission to betray me, and she'd already spent months not needing it. Naomi looked at the floor. I know about Marcus, she said quietly. We all know now. And I nodded, because there was nothing to add. She lost the apartment 2 months after I left, Naomi told me. Couldn't cover it alone. Didn't want to ask anyone. Too proud. She's back at her parents' place now, in the room she grew up in, 31 years old. And Marcus? I asked. Not because I cared, but because I already knew the shape of the answer. Naomi shook her head. He wouldn't even meet her after that weekend. Wouldn't answer. His wife found the messages eventually, and that whole thing burned down too. But he made sure Claire went down with it, and he didn't. I nodded slowly. So she torched a wedding for a man who was never going to leave anyone, I said. And Naomi didn't argue, because there was nothing to argue. Then Naomi said the thing that told me she finally understood. She said, "You were always the quiet one." She thought that meant you'd take anything. And I said, "No, it just meant I was paying attention." She kept thinking I'd resurface, Naomi said. Every few months, she'd say maybe you'd reach out. Maybe you were just hurt, and you'd come back once it's settled. I set my glass down. "Tell her something for me," I said. And Naomi looked up, hopeful for half a second. Like maybe after all this I had a soft ending in me. "Tell her the door she asked me to open," I said. "Only opens one way." Naomi didn't write it down. She didn't have to. Some sentences stay. When we said goodbye, Naomi didn't say goodbye. She just nodded, the way you nod when a lesson lands. People think silence is emptiness. It isn't. It's precision. It's a decision made once. Completely. With no ceremony and no appeal. Claire believed that honesty was a shield, that if she confessed the betrayal before finishing it, that made it noble instead of what it was. She believed love was a negotiation with terms she could set, and she believed, most of all, that a quiet man is a weak man. That stillness means surrender. She learned, the expensive way, that the quietest person in the room is often the one keeping the most careful ledger. She asked me for one last night with her past. I gave it to her. Exactly as requested. No argument. No drama. No scene. And then I gave myself the entire rest of my life, 300 miles away, in a smaller apartment with a better view where the coffee is always hot, and no one has ever once looked at a wall like they were doing math they didn't want the answer to. She asked for one last night with her ex 3 weeks before our wedding, and I smiled and said yes. Because that was the moment she handed me the exit, and I have never, not for one single day, wished I hadn't walked through it. Thank you for watching. Until the very end. Wishing you happiness, peace, and a wonderful day ahead.